it was obvious during the primary that immigration was this driving force that was really motivating people to move right. And that the Democratic approach of saying concern about immigration basically just means that you're a racist wasn't sufficient to assuage people's concerns, whether real or imagined, about immigration. This H-1B visa issue being about relatively well-off folks from other parts of the world, as opposed to folks that were very much at the center of the 2016 race and treated very sympathetically by liberal media and who are incredibly sympathetic and much more disadvantaged, it seems to have opened up space for left folks to talk about immigration and to side with a kind of a populist energy with respect to immigration that maybe wasn't as much there and wasn't as clear when we were kind of battling over whether or not you're allowed to leave a water bottle in the desert for a family that's going to die as they're trying to cross the Rio Grande. You know what I mean? And there does seem to be something, dare I say, like an opportunity in being able to have this kind of populist class conversation happening about folks that are a little bit more removed from the scarcity and trauma of the typical immigration debate and create space for someone like Bernie Sanders to move in and say, yes, you should be prioritizing American workers. I heard someone, I think Sherrod Brown recently, say, yeah, when I was out in the field, I still hear people talking about NAFTA when I'm knocking doors and stuff. These kind of trade concerns are still front of mind for Americans, and Democrats aren't talking about them. And this H-1B visa thing is an opportunity for people to be talking about, for people on the left to be talking about class politics in a way that doesn't get so easily reduced to, oh, you're just a racist if you have any kind of protectionist policy priorities. And I wonder if you see it that way and see any opportunities in that.
Yeah, I mean, I do see it. Well, I mean, one, I think everything's an opportunity. So I'll just say that. But yes, I do. I mean, and I'll say this. Look, someone actually can be a racist, and that doesn't actually mean we shouldn't be trying to reach them or that some of
Sure.
the points that they're making are not speaking to something that's deeper and relevant. And, look, I think you will agree with me as having been Black all your life. America is very racist. So
Mm.
it's hard for me to feel like if no racist changes their mind about anything, we're ever going to be able to make any progress. So I think, a lot of times people focus on the media person. Like, we're not trying to win over Candace Owens, Laura Loomer, Donald Trump, or any of those people. But a lot of the people who are following them, whether we think they're misguided or not, like, we can reach them and we have to believe that. So anyway, I say that to say that, yeah, I do think it's an opportunity. And I think, in some ways, like, it's an opportunity to have a deeper conversation about what class actually means too, right? Like,
Mm.
and what's really going on in the world. And like, if you're a working class person, which is why I am sympathetic. I wrote an article recently at liberationnews.org saying why I think Trump's tariffs are not actually good for workers and different reasons why. But the reason why people want tariffs is because they're thinking we want more jobs. We want people to be able to have good pay. We want them to have good living standards. Like, however true or untrue any of those tropes or whatever people want to lay it out are, like, I think that's what's really fundamentally why that's an appealing message. Like, we need more American jobs is like, our people are hurting, our communities are being destroyed. And like, we know that in this past, maybe it wasn't as much like that. And it seemed like because manufacturing was at the core of it. But why manufacturing has to be the only well-paid job is another question. But again, I think these are all the questions that we have to engage people on. And I think we can win them over because to me, like, this is the thing, like, they're saying you got to help American workers. And like, yeah, we got to help American workers. But realistically, why don't we take the hundreds of billions of dollars that people are hiding in these investment accounts and borrowing money from banks? Like, I mean, I know you know this, but I feel like I learned this 2 years ago and it blew my mind that these Elon Musk and these other people will be like, okay, I don't want to pay capital gains tax. So I'm going to go to a bank. I'm going to borrow huge sums of money from the bank, liquidate just enough money to pay the interest on the loan so that I can have hundreds of billions of dollars and basically pay no taxes. Like, I don't think there's so many things that all workers should be better paid immediately, should have better healthcare immediately, should have better housing immediately without anything changing in immigration or anything else, whatever problems you think there are with immigration, different things like that. And that's why I think it's an opportunity to reframe these issues, to reframe immigration more as kind of like, okay, you're right. How do you get higher wages? For sure, it really isn't free trade or protectionism. You know what I'm saying? It's challenging capitalism. And that's the other thing is This is why capital is not penalized when it crosses borders, because the economy is totally globalized right now. So even the idea that like all problems can be solved in an American context is not even true. So it's like by putting it in all these different frameworks, I think you're in trouble. But if you don't have the conversation in the frameworks you have, you'll never succeed. So I think it is generative, this conversation. I think it has been important. I think immigration is going to be a huge issue no matter what at all levels. And I think it's a great opportunity to start telling people like you have more in common with all other working class people, regardless of immigration status, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. And if you want more money from the Jeff Bezoses of the world, it's like those are the different divides that we have between each other that I'm not saying it's easy, but we got to find some way to cross it. Like it seems to me like pretty basic when you look at like who runs the world and like why we're struggling amidst abundance.
I want to play you this clip from Steve Bannon on this point before we then pivot very quickly and then wrap up to this Pod Save interview that I've been teasing the whole time, but I then got lost in conversation with you.
Please.
Because my concern is that you're completely right that this is an opportunity, that this is in fact an opportunity, but that only one sort of political segment is exploiting it. I want you to respond to this.
Why should an American citizen, his family's been here 5 or 6 generations, that can go to college, get a degree, and is smart enough, why should they have to compete against the world on the territory inside the United States? It's not fair. Until Silicon Valley, until these places have, I don't know, 20% African American and 20% Hispanic, I'd like to put an exit visa on every college graduate, foreign student that graduated from college here in 30 days to leave and go back home and help make their nation great again. And we shouldn't take any foreign students in community colleges. That should be for American citizens, particularly for African Americans and Hispanics. They're never going to get up the economic chain unless we do this. You're not going to get folks into high value added post-industrial jobs based around artificial intelligence or coding or anything like that until we make the engineering schools and computer science schools available to them. And right now we don't. This is the reason. It's not about intelligence. It's about access to opportunity. This is why Silicon Valley has virtually no African Americans and no Hispanics. It's de minimis. They have to compete against the whole world for those jobs. And this is one of the reasons you're seeing the seething anger is that people aren't getting good jobs. And one of the reasons they're not getting good jobs, they have to compete against the whole world here in the United States. It's simply not fair.
So a direct bid to Black and Hispanic Americans as needing to have some priority and even a quota. Steve Bannon advocating a quota for American minorities and prioritizing them over H-1B visa recipients. Am I in the upside down?
It feels like you're in the upside down world. And when you look at the timing of it, this is maybe just, I guess the baseball of it. But you look at the timing of it, it seems like a lot of that debate might have been a trap that he set because that came just a few days before Christmas, if I'm not mistaken, when the whole thing broke out. And what that didn't make as big a rounds, but I saw that and it was going around. And I'm not necessarily saying that there was some politics behind that, but it feels like he might have baited some of these people knowing what they would say to try to bid his own influence up inside the Trump administration. But yeah, I mean, look, I didn't know that Steve Bannon
what do you mean by that? You're saying that he brought up the kind of diversity angle to bait who into
the Elons and the Viveks and the others, because I think that Bannon, who's pretty savvy, is aware that like a full on, like, what this is, I mean, as you know very well, since 2006, the right wing has tried to get Black people to support an anti-immigrant movement and has never really succeeded in making it come out in a big way, even though there are criticisms of immigration in the Black community. Because I think about, again, sometimes I think people can be too paternalistic out here. Like most Black people, I think, whatever their critique of immigration, can recognize when something is just like a racist cover campaign for something else. And I think so Bannon and people like that, I think, are aware of that and have seen these things. Like I'll never forget, when people came out in Leimert Park in LA to prevent right-wing immigration activists locking arms from going and holding a rally there in like 2007, 2008. Like people knew what it was about. Like it's not that they think everything is perfect in the country, but whatever. So I think knowing that, I just have this feeling, I don't know, I have no sources, I'm just saying it, that he knows to do what they want to do, which is to try to deport millions of people, for essentially no reason at all, and demonize them and all these other things, that if you just have the tech companies seeming like they get all the immigration they want, but a guy who's like a roofer coming from Guatemala is like, well, we got to keep him out at all costs. people are going to start to think, well, what is this really about? So anyway, I think there's some politics behind it. But I think to your point, yeah, I mean, look, I didn't know Steve Bannon was against the Bakke decision by the Supreme Court. I didn't know that he was against the Richmond decision. Like all the things that, actually had quotas in government contracting and education. So I think there are two elements to the question. I think that the opportunity politically then is to interject this and to say, okay, well, if there should be affirmative action quotas, which I 100% believe that there should be affirmative action quotas for men, for Black people, for women, for many individuals. I don't see how you have affirmative action without quotas. That's a separate conversation. But like, if that's it, then we have to try to put people on the spot, like what's your proposal then? Like, do you want to roll back 50 years, including the most recent Supreme Court decision? Do you really want to roll back 60 years of Supreme Court precedent that governs quotas? If so, yes, let's do that. Let's put that in Congress, and whoever votes for it, I'm for voting for it and calling your congressperson and say, vote for it, because it was wrong when it started in the late 70s, and it's wrong now, and we should have affirmative action, we should have quotas, and it should apply to private industry. And this, starting with the Civil Rights Act in 1964, is the biggest problem with equality in America, is that when it comes to capitalist private property, they say you can't tell these people what to do. And that this was part of what got the Civil Rights Act watered down in terms of public accommodations. Even though it was good, more could have happened. It's ultimately the premise in many ways behind the banning of quotas. Like at the end of the day, like if we really want equality, you have to be able to tell private corporations who perpetuate the vast majority of discrimination in America, like who to hire and what to do, and make them do it. Like that's the only way to have affirmative action. So anyway, from my point of view, we got to put them on the spot now. Now, there's a whole separate conversation that like, are Black people not really getting tech jobs because they're competing with Indian Americans? I actually don't think that's true. I think African Americans are not being prepared for tech jobs. So they're actually never entering into competition with almost any of these people except for a small sliver, like my alma mater of Howard University, which, has robust STEM now and is, all the partnerships with Google and all that. Like that slice of people is competing. But by and large, from, I'm speaking to you from Baltimore, you're speaking to me from DC. If you go into Ballou High School, are they really preparing people for post-industrial jobs to even get in the competition? I don't think anyone can say that is true.
That was part of his point, right? Didn't he say that he thought that international students shouldn't go to community colleges? Now, there's a different question as to whether or not community colleges are exactly a feeder for these sort of tech jobs in the first place.
Also true.
But you could see him offering the pushback that, like, yeah, I agree that Black students aren't sufficiently prepared, which is why I think that they should have exclusive access or prioritized access to the educational opportunities that would prepare them.
Well, I think that's true. And again, it's another opportunity to put them on the spot, because also Donald Trump wants to get rid of the Department of Education. And part of preparing them is at the elementary school level. Like, I mean, the Title I formula is also not great, but like, this is why a federal Department of Education was first talked about in Reconstruction, because the dream of Black people in the South to go to school, because of the economic challenges, circumstances, and boycotts by rich white people, the only way to really have a robust public school system at scale was to have a federal assistance. And so if you're saying you want to eliminate the Department of Education, you're not serious, because honestly, like, I think a lot of people who know tech know this. You could be a high school student and get hired by Google if you know how to code. You know what I mean? Like, you don't necessarily, like, preparing people for tech jobs is also about at the lowest level, at preschool, at kindergarten, at elementary school. Do you have access to mathematical, scientific, all forms of literacy that put you in a position to take advantage of these opportunities, both through traditional educational routes, but also just being that kid that, like, picks up the book or puts it in YouTube, which a lot of kids are doing now, who are getting into Silicon Valley. They're not doing the traditional route. So you don't even have that level of opportunity because you're not having this true funding. So again, I agree with you that I think that clip, which I shared with many people over the holidays, is a critically important conversation. And we should put everyone on the spot, Democrats and Republicans, like, if they really believe there's any truth to the fact that we need more and better education for our poorest African-American, Latino, and Indigenous children, that there should be affirmative action that's quota-based, that should be imposed on private corporations. Like, Okay, great. But when that was happening, the heroes of Steve Bannon said that's communism and we can't do it. So and maybe it is. Maybe we do need communism to get there. So let's have that conversation. So I just want to make sure we don't get stuck in the trap that's being laid by Bannon, which is to make people feel like your ally is the person that hates immigrants. And that's, maybe you got to convince them not to hate immigrants and they can be your ally. But for a lot of these people, it's about having a different type of exploitation of workers that's not legitimate. So we have to expose Bannon's game, Musk's game, everyone's game. But it's a good conversation to have. And it's a shame, and I'll end here. It's a shame that no Democrats are willing to defend quota-based affirmative action. I'm thinking about this, Brianna, because and now I'm saying this to hold myself accountable. I've been working on an obituary of Jimmy Carter that'll come out on liberationnews.org hopefully soon. And so I've been reviewing the history of the Bakke decision and just thinking about going to how we now have totally outlawed any affirmative action. It really did start when people thought there was some way to do affirmative action around the edges, as if the problems aren't deep and serious, which ultimately to me implies you have to have a form of quota system. And people say quota is not meritocracy, but that is not true. The issue of meritocracy is, can you do the job? Are you prepared to do the job? And this actually came up in the Bakke case. One of the people who actually did not have a good position on it on the Supreme Court, but raised the question, why does someone have the right to go to medical school as opposed to law school, to be a social worker or whatever? Just because you don't get the job that you particularly want the most doesn't mean the person who got it actually is less deserving. And if the question about a quota system is merit, then why aren't we actually doing the things at the base level to make sure that everyone is meritorious to be able to to basically be able to do any job, to have the building blocks to be trained up to a higher level, so that the issue is not merit. The issue is how do we actually equitably share, access to opportunity and resources in our society in a way that makes everyone's lives better. And I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. But again, that's why this sort of conversation about capitalism, the very fact that it's just kind of a random crapshoot, your job, or if you have a job, and that we don't think what are the things we actually need to do and how do we put enough people in position to do them, regardless of what, fucking Jeff Bezos thinks, or Elon Musk or somebody like that. Why are they so a part of the conversation about how billions of us survive on a daily basis when they're 0.000000001% of the world population?
Yeah, this came up in the episode we just did about H-1B visas. I am fascinated by the conversation because it does, I think, it's forcing people who don't otherwise ideologically agree with the left to confront the reality of what the real barriers are that are precluding their progress. And so you have people walking up to the line of saying, well, American workers are disadvantaged because they have student debt as compared to these student workers who need to be paid higher salaries. Oh, is student debt a problem? Should we have free public colleges and universities? And
Yes.
only because in this environment where we're largely talking about white voters that are or white workers that are perceived to be highly educated and meritorious, do the questions that usually come in about how, well, too bad, you should have worked harder, you should have gone to a cheaper school, yada yada yada, not come into the foreground. And it is exciting. It's exciting for that reason. And I really do appreciate you bringing in the conversation about quota systems, because I do think this is another one of those where it's and I have to challenge myself on this from time to time as well, the effort to seem reasonable and to be a populist with broad appeal, I think can sometimes lead us to pick our battles in a productive way and sometimes to cede ground that shouldn't be ceded. And I am going to do some reflection over the extent to which, affirmative action honestly has been such a bête noire for conversations around racial equality, and simultaneously has been so neutered as a policy that it did very little to benefit the descendants of Black American slavery for whom it was ostensibly designed, that frankly, it's being overturned. I think we talked about this. I think maybe Irami said this. It was oh, well, maybe it was Q. Well, good. Well, now the systems will be exposed for being inequitable and not diverse. And the racial problems of America will be unpapered over. And people will just have to contend with what it means to be going to the best school in the world that is all white. And also, by the way, I read these stats out in the last episode. I don't have them in front of me, but also overwhelmingly filled with people who have gotten into those schools because of some form of privilege, whether it's academic scholarships or legacy or what have you. I think it was 47% of all people admitted to, I think it was Harvard, fell under one of those categories. And that was not quote unquote merit based. Okay. All that being said, I want to pivot just for a few minutes to this clip,
Yes.
which I've been teasing this whole time.
Yes, please, of course.
Which is outrageous.
So again, these are the people we think are most likely to jump in the race. Not necessarily win the presidency, but just run.
What do you say we flip for it?
I love it.
All right, I'll go heads.
This is a Canadian dollar made of chocolate. So
as Canadian currency is.
I don't know if this is official. This is a sign about where we'll both be moving soon. What'd you say?
Heads.
Heads it is.
All right. I think the most likely person to run for president in 2028, Gavin Newsom.
Oh, interesting.
I'm the only guy here that's a border state governor. You're trolling folks and trying to find migrants to play political games to try to get some news and attention so you can out-Trump Trump. And by the way, how's that going for you, Ron? You're down 41 points in your own home state.
He will say that he's not running for president to the ends of the earth.
Correct.
No one is setting themselves up harder for a presidential run than Gavin Newsom. Had Kamala won, that means that she would be president 24 to 28 and then run for re-election 28 to 32. That means that Gavin Newsom, who will be term limited in 2026, will be a former governor waiting until 2032 to run for something.
Yeah.
And, once you're not top of mind anymore, you're kind of an afterthought. And so this sets himself up, ends his gubernatorial tenure in 2026, and he can start his presidential campaign right away. Obviously, he wants it. He's doing voluntary debates with Ron DeSantis on Fox News. So of everybody on that list, there's no person more likely than Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, what I like about Gavin Newsom is he is fiercely competitive. He wants to win. He goes into Republican spaces. He debates them. He battles on ideas. He cares a lot. So there's lots to like there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a desperate thirst within the Democratic Party for a fighter, and he's presenting himself as exactly that right now.
Yeah, I've always thought you were pretty thirsty.
I just want to point out that the number one draft pick for Brian Taylor Cohen is Gavin Newsom. And my hot take is that honestly, that is the least controversial, least problematic pick on this list. If you grandfather and that these are just liberals talking about liberal things, at very least what they're saying about him as having some political talent is correct. The second draft pick that you just saw from Tommy Vitor is Kamala Harris. His number one draft pick, rather, is Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who put this up. It was from the 2020 primary of what I think it was on MSNBC. I think it was a poll. I don't know exactly what it was, but it was like her having 0%. And I think there's some people who in their mind are like, yeah, Kamala, like she only had a few weeks. Like if she would have had the whole time, like da-da-da-da. Like, no. This has to be the person who had some of the highest expectations in 2020 and face planted the most. And zero of the demographics that were supposed to back her at all. More Black women were supporting Elizabeth Warren than Kamala Harris, which, and you can see why. So to even think somehow like, oh yeah, she could like really do this. Like we've seen her not even be able to like really keep her head above water for more than a few months in a Democratic primary that in many ways you could argue was weighted in her favor. Yes. And then her actually running for president for 4 months against like, I mean, from my point of view, a not good candidate. Like, I mean, as much as people say Trump is like so good, and there are things that he is good at, but like, to me, his message is not compelling. His style is like kind of an interesting out of the box style, but it doesn't seem to me like it's impossible to counter that. So anyway, I just say all that to say like, what are you thinking? Like, are you kidding me? Like, it just feels, how could you have more? I don't know if you're into sports, but this is why the draft analogy works, because there is always that person in a discussion about a person who like should be good. Like there's a certain vintage of person listening to me who will know if I mention like Jay Cutler's name, like someone who just like, you feel like this should be the Super Bowl winning quarterback. This is the year, this is the game. And it's never the year, it's never the game. Everyone else is trying to tell you we've seen it, it's not working, and you don't. So he's that guy. in the room. But I guess to have a good sports show, you got to have that kind of idiot who somehow can't watch the tape and figure out what's going on.
Well, we've got two, I won't say idiots, but we've got two of those guys here in the mix. Let's
Sorry,
hear,
my response, not an idiot, but just,
No, you're good. But here's Tommy Vitor's rationalization for why Kamala Harris is his number one 2028 draft pick.
I'm going to keep in California here with my pick, which is going to be Kamala Harris.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Get some rest over the holidays. Spend time with the people you love. Then after you have had some rest, come back ready.
Some of you might be thinking, Tommy, she just ran and lost. Why would she run again? I'm sorry, did you not watch the contest where Donald Trump lost and then ran again?
It's not possible, Tommy, for somebody who's lost the presidential race to ever become president.
It happens a lot. Romney ran again, Nixon, Donald Trump. Stranger things have happened. Kamala Harris was put in an impossible position. She had 100 days to run a campaign. It was very difficult. Bad headwinds. Joe Biden never should have run for re-election, so a lot made it difficult. She's still very popular in the party. Name ID means a lot. She could probably raise a lot of money. I'm not saying she's going to win. I'm just saying I think there's a high likelihood of her running.
I'm going to throw a curveball in here.
Curveball.
Do you think that she would be more likely to run for president or governor of California in 26?
I'd love to see her throw her hat in the ring for governor of California. Why not do both?
Well, here's the thing about that, is if she wins the gubernatorial race in California, then she's already got a job. And if she loses, then she's lost the presidential race and the gubernatorial race, not exactly setting herself up for success.
Don't act like politicians care about doing their job. It's all about running for the next thing,
That's
okay?
fair. That's fair. Okay, for my next choice, I'm going to go with Josh Shapiro.
Each of us has a responsibility to get off the sidelines, to get in the game, and to do our part. Are you ready to do your part? Are you ready to form a more perfect union?
Again, clearly has ambitions for higher office. He kind of ran in that same class as Kamala Harris. You can feel the national aspirations with somebody like Josh Shapiro.
The second draft pick being Josh Shapiro, because Pennsylvania, faux Obama, didn't get the VP nod. How out of touch is the Democratic Party to believe that this is the savior that is going to somehow articulate all of these desires to have a more populist campaign, to have someone who seems to understand the average needs of the working person, perhaps the slickest, maybe after Gavin Newsom, person on this list is being put forth as the second draft pick.
Yeah, I mean, very out of touch, I guess, is the direct answer to your question. I mean, this was already somebody who the very consideration of them as the vice presidential candidate had caused people to question whether or not you were a good campaign because of his position on Gaza in particular, but also several other things. And you just think like, yeah, someone who you already didn't pick, who, you know, touches on one of your biggest liabilities, which is your complicity with one of the worst moral events of all time. It just seems like, what are you talking about? Like, are you looking at anything that's happening right now?
Hey, YouTube. Thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.